Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. My name is Nate. I also go by Hockey Boy Nate. Today, we're going to be discussing Tropical Storm Fred as it has been finally designated by the National Hurricane Center. Where this will go and how strong will it be, that is what we will talk about in this video. So if you guys are new to my channel, please be sure to leave a like on the video. Subscribe if you are new as well. Turn on notifications, share this with friends and family, and on social media. Also follow me on social media. Link will be in the description down below. Just a quick note, if this video is a bit off of the usual in terms of quality, just keep in mind that I am not home at the moment, so I don't have the best of equipment for you all here, but I am going to still try and do my best to get the word out as much as possible. Let's take a look at the satellite imagery here. You can clearly see this thing has had a lot of explosive convection here as of late. You can see all those blacks and whites and grays in the middle of all those thunderstorm activities. That's some very deep convection that is rising into the upper parts of the atmosphere. You can tell because the cloud tops are really, really cold. On the indicator on the right-hand side, it tells you actually how cold those cloud tops are. And so the higher and higher those clouds are, the colder they typically get because the higher parts of the atmosphere are typically colder. So some very strong thunderstorm activity that we see from here. We can already see this general clockwise, counterclockwise spin within the atmosphere of the clouds. And so we definitely have this classic tropical system characteristic here. The only issue for the most part, which is what it's been dealing with for the past couple of days, and if I pause the imagery here for you all, you can see that right about here is where the center area of low pressure is, but on the western side, poorly outlined by my semicircle, you can see that it is relatively dry on the western side, and this thing has been really combating with a lot of dry air in regards to the intensification of this tropical system. And for most people who might be wondering, well, why does that matter? You know, you have severe weather that has dry air sometimes, and that ends up producing some very strong thunderstorms. Well, tropical systems are somewhat different from severe weather in its own way, and in this instance, it cannot have any dry air in order for it to sustain. And so that's a good factor of limiting thunderstorms and tropical development. And because we have some of that dry air still lingering, it's more or less the reason why Tropical Storm Fred isn't a lot stronger. Another thing that I do want to mention here, a good thing to look out for in regards to ventilation issues or any sort of ventilation. If you see it on a tropical system, then you know that it is somewhat healthy. It's doing the right things in order for it to continue to sustain. And if you see these little feathers right here, you can see how it's these little tight lines within the clouds right within there. That's the ventilation of the tropical system. And so when the tropical system exerts energy, or it's just a lot of power from it, from all that convection, it ends up distributing these little feathers in an anticyclonic flow. And you can see that if you watch that again, you can see how these feathers kind of curl this way. And typically you would see on another tropical system, you can even see it with these other clouds right about here. You can see how this kind of curls out that way. And so you do have some decent anticyclonic flow or ventilation, designating that this is a decent tropical storm. Now, let's take a look at the cone of uncertainty here for Fred. And the latest advisory for Fred has been designated as a 40-mile-per-hour tropical storm, the latest of its kind. It's the second advisory. They did have an advisory at 11 o'clock that did say that it was a tropical storm. I believe they had another advisory at 2 o'clock in the morning as well, but this is 5 a.m. Atlantic Standard Time, or Eastern Daylight Time for most people, and 1,009 millibars. It did drop about 5 millibars, so that is a good sign for the development of this tropical system. As this continues to move on closer towards Hispaniola, you can see how this actually does go down into the black circle with the letter D in the middle. That stands for tropical depression. And what's basically happening here is it's encountering a lot of friction over land. That's the reason why most tropical systems, these famous hurricanes that most people have heard of, they tend to really start to dissipate once they hit land. It's because There isn't really a lot of moisture, a lot of energy over land, a lot of friction, especially with mountains and land and trees and all sorts of stuff to try and get itself and its act together in the best way possible. So once you start to disrupt its motion of the ocean, if you will, that's when it starts to weaken a little bit. But then once it gets out of the Dominican Republic and the Haiti vicinity, the National Hurricane Center does say that it could potentially head up a bit further towards Cuba and maybe even stay over the water. And if it does stay over the water, then you can expect this to intensify a little bit more. There is another part of the cone of uncertainty that says that it could be over the mainland of Cuba. So really interesting to watch out for in regards to the intensity. And we really have to watch out as to how this will progress, because everything matters in this instance. And, for most people who might be wondering, why does land interaction matter that much? Well, in this case, if we quickly go over to Google Maps here, take a look at Haiti and the Dominican Republic, you can see there's some instances to where it's not just flat land over there. There's actually some mountains that this thing could interact with. So really interesting to watch out for, especially since that mountains can play a key role into disrupting tropical systems. It's happened before. It's not just fluke, some instances where you have it just going over a small piece of land and it weakens significantly. There is mountains over in this general vicinity, and it can completely disrupt tropical systems as it continues to progress. Now, if we quickly take a look, if we go over to the earliest reasonable arrival times of tropical storm force winds, this will give you a timetable as to when you guys can first see your tropical storm force winds within your general vicinity. So already, we should know here that Hispaniola is already getting its activity here Wednesday morning into Wednesday evening. That's kind of an obvious situation here. The big thing here, for the most part, is the Bahamas. When are you guys going to get impacted? So the main area of the Bahamas here, probably at around Thursday afternoon into Thursday evening. And then once you get closer towards the Keys and Miami, it would be more or less sometime in the afternoon, early stages of the afternoon, maybe even prior to that on Friday, when you guys could potentially get your tropical storm force winds starting. This is when it starts. And then even as it further progresses, National Hurricane Center sometimes does this out ahead of time to where it tells people 5 days out as to when this could potentially be impacting your area. And so if this thing does stay out just to the west of the Florida Peninsula, you could potentially be seeing some tropical storm force winds further and further towards Tampa at around the Saturday morning hours, and even closer towards the Pensacola areas. Maybe on Sunday morning is when you guys could see some of that activity right there. So really something that we got to watch out for, but just those timings for you all as to when you guys could be getting your activity. Now, I want to take a look at the model intensity guidance here real quickly, and I want to point some key factors here. I made my video last night about what most of the models thought this strength was going to be for the tropical systems. And last night, we had a couple models that said that this thing could most likely intensify from 0 hours out to 3 days out, or 72 hours out right there. And now, that's not exactly the case, especially since some models actually said that within that time frame, or about that time frame, you could potentially have a Category 1 hurricane on your hands. But according to this latest run by most of the models, they don't think that's the case right then and there. So that is the good news within that case. But one thing that it is concerning to me is from 3 days out right here, all the way out to about 5, even 6 days, 7 days out towards the end of the run, you have a lot of models that show a sharp increase here of intensity. A lot of models say that. There are some that stay at the floor, which would be tropical storm status, but you have a couple models that are really showing that this could potentially intensify further, potentially into a Category 1 hurricane right here, which would be about 75 miles per hour. So really interesting to say the least. There are some models that say this could be a high-end tropical storm. I actually could see that as a possibility 5 days from now. So really something we're going to have to watch out for in regards to the intensity. But let's take a look at the spaghetti models here. It's just a giant consensus that we're looking at the moment. We have to take a look at a bunch of different models, get a bunch of different opinions, and this would give us a better idea as to what most of the simulations think, and we can use that to our advantage to try and get warnings out ahead of time. So we got our forecasted spaghetti models here. A lot of the different runs actually still take it very close towards Cuba. They obviously take it over the Dominican Republic, so it will encounter some land interaction over there. But the big thing here that we got to watch out for is, will this, as I said, will this go close to Cuba? Will it go overland in Cuba? And then will it curl off into Florida? Will it stay off in the Gulf of Mexico? Will it curl off in the Gulf of Mexico towards the general vicinity of Panama City? That is something that we really got to watch out for. And according to the GFS model, or the GEFS model, this actually takes it very close to that general vicinity, so we got to watch out for that. The Euro model takes it a lot closer towards towards Florida, actually. And the Euro model also takes this very, very well offshore of Cuba. So this could potentially even signify a much rather intense tropical system. Not exactly hurricane status. You do have one model ensemble member that says that this could become a hurricane, but it ends up being a hurricane right about here when it actually goes through the Bahamas and parallels up the eastern coast. So I don't exactly see that as a big possibility. I'm more inclined to believe that it actually gets very close to the Keys and rides up that way. I think that's more of a high likelihood from this model. But even then, still really something that we have to watch out for is that most of the model guidance still takes it very close to Florida, and I would say Floridians really need to watch out for the potential impacts of this tropical system. Now, I do want to take a look at a couple other things as we continue to go about. We're going to take a look at the simulated radar here from the HWRF model. And the one thing that I did want to talk about here was that last night I showed you all this model again. I told you all that this thing highly favors rapid intensification, so sometimes it can overdo the actual intensity of tropical cyclones. And this is a good example of it right here. So this is what this run was last night. It would be about 5 or 6 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And you can see how this thing progresses as it gets closer towards Hispaniola. It weakens a little bit, but then it goes overland, and then this thing really intensifies, goes below 1,000 millibars, and even intensifies to a 983 millibar storm, and even becomes a hurricane at that point. But as of right now, this is what occurred as of the past couple of hours. Here's the latest run of the HWRF model. And you can see that this thing kind of loses its edge a little bit. You can see how the model actually loses track of where the center area of low pressure is as it goes over the mountains of Hispaniola. But according to this late model run, this thing actually takes it parallel to the coast, if not on the coast of Cuba, and completely misses Florida that way. It even goes through the Keys, though, for the most part. But the Miami-Dade area, according to this latest run, actually does get spared by the center area of low pressure. Still gets these outer bands here. That's the one thing that I'm most concerned about, is these outer bands here across Florida. Widespread tornado risk is possible with all of that, especially with the fact that there is a trough north of this system that's kind of steering this up closer towards Florida. That's exactly what's probably going to happen in this instance. Maybe some baroclinic deepening is forecasted a bit later on in its life cycle, and so a potential tornado threat could even exist further up north towards the mid-Atlantic. But the big thing there is that these bands that swirl on the northeastern side of the system, even on the eastern side of the system, could create a tornado risk, and so we really need to watch out for that as that gets closer and closer towards Florida. Even then, with this latest model run, it takes it very, very close towards Florida, and even almost brushes Tampa. You can see these very intense rain bands here that go right over Fort Myers into Tampa, St. Petersburg, that general vicinity. And so really need to watch out for that. And this is by Sunday morning right here. Sunday morning, this is when this tropical system could be knocking on Tampa's door. So really interesting to look out for that. And then even if we go towards the latter stages of the models, this thing actually takes it a bit closer towards the Mexico City area, even into Pensacola, and this is apparently when it rapidly intensifies into a hurricane again. As I said, this thing can be very bullish as to its intensities, so I would take that as a grain of salt for right now. The big thing is the track of this tropical system and to where this thing could go. That is the main priority right now for most people who are trying to track out this system, and so that we can try and get the warning out as best as possible and for what all could be happening. So, we could just prepare for anything. It's just one of those things at the moment. Now, I do want to quickly take a look at what this thing has been dealing with for quite some time. And so I was talking about this dry air and how this thing could be impacted by it. And what we're looking at right now is the relative humidity within the mid-level stages of the atmosphere. And so this brown area right within here, that's a lot of dry air, a lot of dry air over there in America. And then these green areas, that's areas of very high moisture, very high humidity levels over there, which basically humidity is just the closer and closer dew points and the actual temperature can get to each other. So one thing about that. But as this kind of continued to move closer and closer towards Puerto Rico yesterday, you can see how you had a lot of dry air here that was interacting with this tropical system. And that's kind of the reason why there was a lot of kind of open air when we saw the tropical system yesterday. Not a whole lot of convection, not a whole lot of thunderstorm activity. And so that's kind of the reason why they didn't designate this as a tropical system quite yet. And dry air, basically, as I said, limits thunderstorm activity, and that's the only way tropical systems can really intensify, except for a baroclinic deepening, which I mentioned earlier. But we don't have that anytime soon, I should say. And so this thing just kind of meandered through closer and closer past Puerto Rico into Hispaniola. But the thing of it is as we continue to move through with the model, you can see how the dry air starts to dissipate a bit, and you get a lot more moisture with the system as it heads over Hispaniola. So the one thing about that is that the dry air will begin to seed a little bit. It still will be, a little bit drier than it typically should be for tropical systems by any stretch of the imagination. But as it gets closer and closer towards Florida, it won't exactly be the case. And here is your tropical system again that we'll be watching. Very moist across the board there, especially as it heads towards the Keys. And so really something we got to watch out for. Will that play a factor into further intensification? Most likely. And so you could potentially see a redesignation of this tropical system from a tropical depression, probably back into a tropical storm. And then, according to the GFS, this thing takes it into the Gulf of Mexico, and it will eventually head off closer and closer towards Mexico Beach. So really something interesting to watch out for there. One final thing is that they are doing hurricane aircraft reconnaissance here. We do have the hurricane hunters out within this tropical system at the moment. Really interesting to look at here because we do have the latest data that's coming in right now as we speak. And there's actually been some readings here that have said that the surface winds, which has been averaged over 10 seconds each, you do have some activity within that convection that got over 50 knots. And I do want to verify that here real quickly if I refresh this page here. We do have 41 miles per hour winds here at the surface, according to the hurricane hunters there. And that seems to be practically more or less the case with this. So maybe a further intensification of this tropical system as it heads on further. But the big thing there is that you do have tropical storm force winds right within that general vicinity. And so big thing to show off for how this thing is doing, especially since, we haven't really seen a whole lot of data in regards to this thing having the sustainability of tropical storm force winds. Now we have that within the latest reconnaissance data. So, all it is now, the big key things here is that we need to watch out for where this thing ends up after it moves through Hispaniola, whether or not it will stay on the coast of Cuba or it will go off the waters here, off into open waters, whether or not this will actually head off towards the Miami-Dade area or it will head off to the Keys and right up along the western coast of the Florida Peninsula. That is the big thing here. All eyes are going to be watching on Friday evening into Saturday morning, even into Saturday evening, as to whether or not this thing will be a high-end tropical storm and where it will impact. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys did enjoy the video, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, turn on notifications, share this with friends and family, and on social media. Also follow me on social medias. Link will be in the description down below. I will catch you guys tomorrow morning. Peace out, everyone.